Anytime you watch a Halloween movie, you know there are going to be Easter eggs in honor of John Carpenter, the director of the original Halloween and creator of that iconic soundtrack. Scoring movies was not Carpenter's only musical endeavor. He also had a band, which we see covered in the pub scene in Halloween Kills.
I thought that was gonna be like a holiday pizza party with a bunch of coworkers.
They're singing She Don't Want You Anymore by the Coup de Villes.
Daddy, don't take it hard when you cry. Mama tears you apart when she lies.
This band consists of Carpenter, Nick Castle, who played Michael Myers in the original and parts of the new trilogy, and Tommy Lee Wallace, the production designer of the original and the director of Halloween 3. These mermaid triplets were not the only John Carpenter reference in this talent show.
I think I'll break off with my girlfriend. Her antics are clear, I'll admit. Each time I say, darling, I love you, she tells me that I'm full of shit.
The song is called Shaving Cream, and it was originally aired by a radio host known as Dr. Demento before being released on a compilation album called Dr. Demento's Dementia Royale. In Halloween and Halloween 2, there's a special on TV called Dr. Dementia's Horror Movie Marathon.
I plan on making popcorn and watching Dr. Dementia. 6 straight hours of horror movies. Little Lindsay Wallace won't know what hit her.
To learn how Halloween Kills answered a question that never fully made sense in the original, how Karen shares a connection with her counterpart from another timeline, Easter eggs from deleted scenes, and all of the Halloween franchise references, stick around to the end of this video. Welcome to Things You Missed. Evil dies tonight.
Evil dies tonight.
Evil dies tonight!
Evil dies tonight!
All right, evil dies tonight! Not evil dies tonight!
Spoiler alert, he didn't die. Halloween Kills is the direct sequel to Halloween 2018. David Gordon Green would return to direct and co-write the screenplay with Danny McBride and Scott Teems. As the title would imply, this entry would focus more on the kills, but also on returning characters from the original, most of whom get killed. Later in this episode, I'll be joined by Jimmy Champagne, who will talk about the little details that secretly set up aspects of the finale, Halloween Ends. Let's get into the things you missed. The opening shot shows us some balloons. I couldn't help but notice that the colors are the same colors as the Letterboxd logo. Letterboxd is a social media site where you can log all of the movies that you watch, so it's almost as if this is a subtle reminder to log Halloween Kills on Letterboxd. I don't know if this was actually the intention, but if it was, it's a clever way to remind people to give this movie some free advertising on social media. They just might want to do it at the end next time, not the beginning. This shot leads to Cameron discovering Deputy Hawkins where we last left him, injured on the street in the previous movie. I'm surprised Cameron didn't brush this off as a Halloween prank of some kind, but lucky for Hawkins, Cameron is able to get him help. We flash back to Halloween night in 1978, where a group of cops meet up in an alley and Hawkins says that he saw Michael cross through and disappear. Chronologically, the scene takes place right after the original Halloween. On another timeline in Halloween 2, we see an alternate version of the events, where Michael similarly cuts through an alley to escape. As I mentioned in my last video, Lonnie Elam is a character from the original. He's this kid, but here we can also see the Smith's Grove car that Michael stole on Halloween now parked outside of the Myers house, which means at some point after getting shot by Loomis, he drove the car back to his home. There is another clue that Michael returned home that can be seen when Hawkins and McCabe go to investigate the house and enter Judith's old room. The right window is now closed. In Halloween, we saw Sam Loomis and Sheriff Brackett visit the room earlier that same night, and in that scene, the window was open. Everything else about the set and kills was carefully matched to the set from Halloween, from the wallpaper to the broken window on the left to the exact lamp on Judith's desk. So this closed window must be a suggestion that Michael came home and closed it. Anyone who noticed this may start to wonder where the boogeyman is hiding. That question would soon be answered when he pops out to attack McCabe, one of the few instances where we see Michael Myers run. And if you look closely, you'll notice he attempts to strangle the officer with a length of rope. This answers a question that fans have always had since the original Halloween. When Michael broke into the hardware store, Sheriff Brackett describes the items that were stolen.
All they took was some Halloween mask, rope, and a couple of knives.
We see Michael wear the mask, we see him use the knives, but until now, we never saw the rope, though you could say that it was used to tie Bob upside down in the closet. That's what I think the purpose of the rope was, but it's cool to at least see a second use for it here in Kills. It was also very clever writing to have Hawkins be the one to kill his partner rather than Michael, because it means that this line from Halloween 2018 is technically still true.
Michael Myers murdered 5 people.
If Michael had killed McCabe, that would have been 6. It would have screwed everything up. You can sit back down now, CinemaSins. The flashback scene ends just as the opening scene from the original movie did, with Michael walking outside and standing in front of his house with a blank expression, where the camera pulls back and he's eventually captured by police. That takes us to the opening title sequence, which features several burning jack-o'-lanterns to represent the fire that Michael was left in at the end of the last movie. There are 12 in all, each progressively more burnt, perhaps because Halloween Kills is number 12 in the franchise. If they really wanted to get metaphorical, they could have made number 8 a pile of poop instead of a jack-o'-lantern. The bar where several of our returning characters convene is an Irish pub known as Mick's, with a horseshoe and shamrock on the sign. This is probably a small nod to the original Halloween timeline, which used Celtic lore to explain Michael's condition. In Halloween 2, the source of Michael's powers is the Gaelic festival of Samhain. In Halloween 3, it is the motivation for Conal Cochran's evil plans, and in Curse of Michael Myers, the dates of Michael's attacks are tied to constellations and ancient festivals of Celtic legend. I go in depth on this lore in each of my Things You Missed episodes on those movies, but for the purposes of Halloween Kills, all you need to know is that Samhain eventually transformed into the holiday that we know today as Halloween, the title of this franchise. As I mentioned in the last episode, this couple, dressed as a nurse and doctor, briefly appeared in Halloween 2018, likely as a reference to the original Halloween 2, which featured Michael taking out Dr. Mixter and his staff of nurses. Their names are Vanessa and Marcus, like in Halloween 2018, can never seem to remember his stethoscope.
Wait, hang on, I don't have my stethoscope. Shit, I forgot my stethoscope.
Just as they were teased in the previous film before becoming actual characters, they tease a character coming up in the next movie, Halloween Ends.
Yeah, no, that's right, you're right. No, stand up for myself. So tomorrow morning, I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna quit that.
Punch Dr. Mathis in the face.
Apparently, Dr. Mathis has been casted and will be a character in this final installment. But there's also a more significant detail about Marcus and Vanessa that you probably didn't think about the first time through. In my Things You Missed episode on Halloween 2018, I talked about how Laurie Strode tried to reverse the roles between herself and Michael Myers to make her the hunter and him the hunted. To symbolize this switch, there are many other role reversals in the movie, like Allison and Cameron's Halloween costumes being a gender-swapped Bonnie and Clyde. We see this trend continue here in Halloween Kills with Marcus and Vanessa. Marcus is dressed as a doctor and Vanessa as a nurse, which are the opposite of their actual jobs.
I'm a doctor, my husband's a nurse.
I should have guessed.
Another pair of characters are swapped in a similar fashion. Big John and Little John are the current residents of the Myers house. At one point, we see them standing side by side, and Little John is a lot taller than Big John. Unless the names are talking about when the two are eventually killed by Michael Myers, they die in the same positions as the framed photograph in the upstairs office, but their places are swapped. Because Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends both began pre-production shortly after Halloween 2018, there's a lot more continuity among the three films than we've seen before in this franchise. Being an authority on this franchise, my friend Jimmy Champagne is the perfect person to tell you about some of those details and why some of them are going to be important going forward.
Something that makes this movie feel like more than the sum of its parts to me, outside the attention to detail during the flashback, is how much continuity there is between Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills. There are also other setups that are supposed to be significant in Ends. In Mick's bar, we see a poster for the local radio station 94.9 WURG, The Urge with Willie the Kid. Later on, when Mr. Tivoli breaks into Marcus and Vanessa's car, we hear the radio DJ say the same channel name.
WURG 94.9, giving you The Urge with Willie the Kid.
This could tie into the big radio tower we see at various points throughout Haddonfield in Halloween Kills, even the 1978 flashback, which seems to be hinted at possibly being a part of Halloween Ends in the commentary track.
Jesus, what are you up with this radio tower? Is it going to be in the third movie,
Now it's the only
Dave?
thing I'm gonna notice.
I don't know.
And speaking of Mr. Tivoli, we see him during the intro scene of Halloween 2018 before Aaron and Dana meet Michael Myers for the first time. Before the encounter, Dr. Sartain mentions that they should tie their shoes because he has a fixation with laces, and then when we see him in Halloween Kills, there's a quick insert shot where we see that he's wearing Vans slip-ons. And then finally, his umbrella is found in the car. Sticking with Kills, Big John and Little John have a sign tucked away in their office for Big John and Little John Realty. We also see that same sign when Tommy is rounding up locals to hunt down Michael Myers. And then of course there's also a similar ad on the corkboard by their front door. This backstory for the characters works super well because it explains why they would ever want to live in the Myers house. They probably got it for a steal because it was vacant for so long, but I'm just glad we didn't get a cliche line about that in the movie like we would in pretty much any other horror movie, and it's all given to us through context clues with props inside their actual house and throughout the rest of the movie. I also personally like it a lot more than what we got in the original timeline with John Strode moving into the Myers house. The Myers Myers' house, where he also seems to be running his own realty business. Or at the very least, he probably got a good deal on the joint from his brother, who is definitely a realtor.
So in a way, Big John and Little John are the spiritual successors to John Strode?
Yeah, they even share the similarity of being victims of Halloween pranks played by trick-or-treaters.
You stinking kids got about 3 seconds to get the hell off my property. 1, 2, get out of my yard, you little pervert!
I never understood why he calls them perverts. All they did was steal candy. But I do kind of understand why they made a reference to a character from Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. It's because Halloween Kills shares a huge similarity with that movie, in that these are the only 2 Halloween films where Tommy Doyle comes back as an adult. They actually considered bringing back Paul Rudd to play him again, but it seems like it didn't work out, probably for the same reason they didn't want Laurie's daughter to be named Jamie in Halloween 2018. It would just be confusing for casual fans to have strong elements of another timeline like that. So instead, they loaded up the movie with more covert Halloween 6 Easter eggs.
People are afraid. That is the true curse of Michael.
Or, you know, not so covert. Another similarity between the 2 adult Tommies is their weapons. In Kills, Tommy sticks with his trusty baseball bat, despite having access to guns. This reminds me of the end of Curse, where in the theatrical cut, Tommy beats down Michael Myers with a pipe, which he swings around like a baseball bat. I also think the scene where Tommy breaks Old Huckleberry off of its moorings is symbolic. All these legacy characters have waited years and years in Haddonfield, and now they'll finally get to jump into action to fight Michael Myers. However, many of them would suffer a similar fate. This would be the 4th time Nancy Stevens was cast to play Marion Chambers. She was in H2O, Halloween 2, and of course the original, where she was attacked by Michael from the car. He climbs on top of the vehicle and reaches down to grab her. This time, he uses the same tactic by mounting the SUV she's traveling in, punching through that passenger side window, and reaching in to get his hands on her. But this time, Nurse Chambers doesn't make it. Michael stabs Marcus in the eye, like what he did to Dr. Mixter in Halloween 2, then kicks open the car door on Vanessa for his finest and also maybe funniest kill of all time. Lindsay Wallace has her own encounter with Michael shortly after, where she's being choked, but manages to get away by peeling his mask off. She probably picked this up from Laurie, who did just that to escape Michael's grasp in the original. One of the kills earlier in the movie is also a callback. We meet the ex-firefighter Phil Larson and his wife, Sandra, who by the way was the gravekeeper from Halloween 2018. Michael kills Phil by reaching through the door to grab him. We've seen him do this a number of times, most notably through the closet in Halloween and through Laurie's front door in Halloween 2018. While this next one isn't a kill and isn't Michael Myers, there is a callback when Vanessa leaves the bar and rushes to her car. We see the windows are all fogged up, signaling that someone is hiding inside, just like when Michael stakes out inside of Annie's car in Halloween 1978. At the end, Allison falls down the stairs, just like Laurie did in the original. Karen stabs Michael with a pitchfork, just like Michael did to Spitz in Halloween 5. And this guy brings a hockey stick to fight Michael, just like the kid at the beginning of H2O. I guess that's still more reasonable than this lady, who brings an iron to fight Michael Myers, a character so great that fans started calling her the Iron Maiden of Haddonfield.
Hey everybody, this is Melissa Lay and I am the Iron Maiden of Haddonfield.
New Halloween Ends poster just dropped. In actuality though, people are going to riot if she's not in the movie. Like at the very least they could throw her a cameo in the news or something, in the same way that Julian got a little screen time in Kills after being a popular character in the last film. Best case scenario though, the Iron Maiden rises from the dead to kill Michael Myers with her iron. The mob that the Iron Maiden is seen in is a continuation of the mob from the bar, and if we look more closely, we can discover even more secrets. You know, as far as extras go, the Iron Maiden of Haddonfield gets all the support, but I personally think the guy who realized that moving to Haddonfield was a huge mistake deserves some love as well. He's part of the mob of vigilantes who come out of the bar and into town seeking retribution. In case there's any doubt that this is in part to the same group from the bar, we've got this lady repping the Mix Bar merch. Buy that merch. This group's existence is a reference to Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, where we see a good old group of Illinois boys storm out of the bar to hunt down Michael, but they accidentally kill Ted Hollister instead. What happens here is pretty similar. In Kills, they go after Mr. Tivoli, who jumps out of the window to avoid being massacred by the mob.
Goddamn.
These new Illinois boys actually spend most of the movie chasing the wrong guy. Between that, the fact that Officer Hawkins accidentally shoots his own partner while aiming for Michael, and this line from Brackett,
"Now he's turning us into monsters."
The idea of hysteria and outrage being just as dangerous as a serial killer is more prevalent here than ever before. This is fitting for a Halloween movie released in the era of cancel culture. People even tried to cancel this movie multiple times. Yeah, these cancel culture people are f***ing deranged losers. Whether it's an intentional message by the writers or just a natural product of trying to portray our society, I find it fitting that Halloween Kills highlights a societal issue relevant to the time period, following in the footsteps of the original Halloween, which I talked about in my Halloween Things You Missed. One thing that can be confusing for some people is the Halloween timeline, or as I sometimes call it, the Halloween Express. All aboard. The current timeline includes Halloween, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. It does not include Halloween 2. However, in the pub scene where Tommy introduces Lindsay to the crowd, he mentions how her babysitter Annie was killed. The movie shows us a couple of shots of Annie from Halloween, then, curiously, this shot of her on the stretcher in Halloween 2. While Halloween 2 is still not part of this timeline, it makes sense that this part of the story would have happened anyway en route to Halloween 2018. On a similar note, much of this movie takes place at Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, which shares a similar name and logo as the hospital in Halloween 2. But again, I think we can just assume that this hospital already existed, even if it wasn't shown in the first movie. I know this caused a little bit of confusion for some, but look at it like this. In the original, Laurie had a crush on a boy named Ben Tramer.
I'd rather go with Ben Tramer.
But in Halloween 2, which takes place the same night, Tramer is killed. So Tramer died at about 17 years old in that timeline. However, in Kills, Hawkins tells the story of one night when he was out with Laurie at a bar but didn't get past first base because...
But I knew you were sweet for her. Ben Tramer.
In the US, you have to be at least 21 years old to go to a bar, so this implies that Tramer at least lived to see 21, and may still be alive, which I'm sure Jimmy is very excited about. Now, before I get into the meaning of the ending and some of the deleted scenes, there are a few more Easter eggs that I want to talk about, so let's go back to the beginning. Anytime you watch a Halloween movie, that's not what I meant. That is also not what I meant. I'm taking it back to the apparently controversial firefighter scene. The name on one of the firefighters' helmets reads Gamby. Gamby was a character played by co-writer Danny McBride when he was on the TV series Vice Principals. We can see that the fire trucks have been painted to say City of Haddonfield, but the helmet still says WFD, or Wilmington Fire Department, the unit from Wilmington, North Carolina, where the movie was filmed. CinemaSins, you can stand back up now. That means the gear they use is real firefighting gear, so these E31 helmets are probably just a coincidence, not a reference to Halloween being on October 31st or something. Actually, later at the bar, if you look at this man's phone, you'll see that the time is now 12:07, meaning that we've officially crossed into November 1st. So the final 74 minutes of Halloween Kills doesn't actually take place on Halloween, which is another similarity it shares with Halloween 2, where we see the November sunrise at the end. Then we see another news report on WCZD. Nice. They show photos of some victims from 1978, including Linda and her boyfriend Bob. However, for Bob, they apparently just Googled Bob 1970s high school and found this old yearbook photo of the actor Bob Odenkirk. He is not the one who played Bob in Halloween. That was John Michael Graham. But it kind of looks like him, so they just went with it. I don't know why David Gordon Green thought Googling Bob 1970s high school would work, but it did. Target Halloween decorations, nice. Zombie American Gothic, I've done that meme before, nice. Let's go back to the kids that pulled the prank on Big John and Little John. The girl claims that there was a rusty razor blade in her sister's Halloween candy, which she got at their house. If you've seen my Halloween 2018 episode, you'll recognize that their masks are the Silver Shamrock masks from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. However, these are not the same kids that we saw in Halloween 2018. If you look at the skeleton kid's ribcage, it's clearly a different costume. But anyway, the girl claims that there was a rusty razor blade in her sister's Halloween candy, which she got at Big John and Little John's house. Little John is dressed up as a pirate. In Halloween 2, a kid dressed up as a pirate goes to the hospital after biting into a razor blade. During the panic at the hospital, one cop informs the chief that they've called for backup.
Requested backup officers and medical staff from Russellville and Eaton County for support, but no confirmation.
I feel like I've already said this a million times by now, but Russellville is a reference to the line from Halloween 1 where the gravekeeper tells a story that happened in the nearby town of Russellville. Russellville was a city in Kentucky near where John Carpenter went to college. We get another scene with the two Johns later that morning where they hear more noises outside the house.
Next time I'm coming with a pitchfork.
This is foreshadowing. I already mentioned it, but there's a moment towards the end where Karen saves her daughter by absolutely impaling Michael with the pitchfork. Lol. The sound effect used even shows us that it's a real metal pitchfork, not just a plastic Halloween decoration. There's a scene in the dining room where Little John gets spooked by his own reflection, but in front of the mirror, there's this guillotine decoration. This is one of those things where it could be just a Halloween decoration, or it could be a little nod to that famous beheading scene from Halloween H2O 20 years later. I do have Jimmy still here. I am requiring him to stay until the end of this video, even though he already said his part. Jimmy, what are your thoughts on this?
Wait, what?
There's also a glimpse into the remodeled upstairs bedroom. This is Judith's old room, and there's a very similar desk with a mirror and lamp in the same corner where Judith was brushing her hair on that fatal evening in 1963. When Little John encounters the shape, he says this.
Michael, you've come home.
Which seems to be an homage to Loomis's line in the first film.
He came home.
Of course, that wouldn't be the only classic line that came back.
You know, it's Halloween.
Everyone's entitled to one good scare.
I also noticed that the street address of the Myers house is 709 in this movie. This confused me because everybody knows that the Myers lived at 45 Lampkin Lane, right? As it turns out, I'm here to tell you they're wrong. I guess this is kind of one of those Mandela effect moments. After seeing the Myers address was 709 in Halloween Kills, just to be sure, I went back and checked, and to my surprise, 45 Lampkin Lane was actually an invention of the sequel, Halloween 2.
The old Myers house, 45 Lampkin Lane.
If you look back at the original Halloween, it's actually 709. Kinda hard to make it out, but you can clearly see 701 on the neighbor's house, and you can even kind of make out the painted over 709 in 1963. So actually, Halloween Kills got it right, and Halloween 2 got it wrong. Now let's talk about the ending. Allison and Cameron go to the Myers house after Cameron's dad, and Allison discovers the death of little John and proceeds to take the knife out of him. She doesn't even need a knife, she already has a gun. You don't bring a knife to a gunfight. You bring a clothing iron. Lucky for Allison, she's saved by her mother, after which she comments on the everlasting presence that the boogeyman has branded on their town.
He'll always be here, won't he? Even when we can't see him.
This line serves as a parallel to the words of comfort her mom offers her at the beginning of the movie.
Dad's gone. He'll always be with us, even if we can't see him.
Both of these moments comment on the tendency of strong emotions to have long-lasting power, one with love and the other with fear, and both of them come with Allison wrapped in her mother's arms sitting on the stairs. Afterwards, we see Karen look up into the right bedroom window, Judith's old room, and she sees the 6-year-old version of Michael Myers staring out blankly. This puts her in the same camp as her counterpart from the original timeline, who saw a vision of the young, costumed Michael in a reflection at the drugstore. In an early draft of Halloween 2018, Karen was going to be named Jamie, just like Laurie's daughter in the original timeline, who we meet in Halloween 4. However, they decided not to do that, fearing that it would be too confusing. But the two versions of Laurie's daughter do share the same experience of seeing a strange image of Michael Myers' past. In January of 2022, Halloween Kills was released on physical media along with an extended cut that includes a few lengthened scenes and additional scenes. The 1978 flashback with Lonnie Elam now includes an extra bit of Lonnie walking home and seeing Michael Myers peering out from behind a shrub. This is a reference to the iconic scene in the original where Laurie briefly spots Michael on the way home from school. The ending of the extended cut also brings back elements of the John Carpenter original. After Karen is taken out by Michael, she receives a call on her cell phone. It's Laurie calling from the hospital, and she simply hears the sound of breathing against a plastic mask and knows that it's Michael. She knows this because of the call she received on Halloween night 40 years ago to this day, after her friend Linda was strangled by Michael, and she heard the same sound over the telephone line. We are now as close as we will ever be to the final installment, Halloween Ends. To make sure you're caught up on all things Halloween before going into that movie, make sure you watch Jimmy's video on the right and drop him a sub. I'm sure you will after watching that video. As always, I'll be going in depth with everything you might have missed in Halloween Ends. Make sure you don't miss it by subscribing to CZ's World for new horrors every week, ring the death bell for all notifications, and I will see you in the next one, assuming we both survive.